it should have been a catastrophe. Germany knew a major Allied landing was coming somewhere in the Mediterranean that summer. The German commanders were experienced. The fortifications were serious. They were expecting it. They were simply not certain it was Sicily. That uncertainty, a single manufactured doubt, changed the shape of the battle that followed. It is part of why the landing succeeded at the cost it did, rather than something far worse. The operation that created that doubt is known, at least in outline. The name most associated with it is Ewan Montagu, a naval intelligence officer whose 1953 memoir made the story famous. But there was another man in the room when the plan was first conceived. He has almost no presence in the popular record. His name was Charles Cholmondeley. The original idea was his. In the autumn of 1942, British intelligence was confronting a problem with no elegant solution. The Allied High Command had settled on their next major Mediterranean objective, Sicily. The Germans knew it too. The question was not whether Germany would defend the island. The question was whether Germany could be made to defend somewhere else at the same time, to introduce enough doubt that Sicily would not be fully fortified when the Allies arrived. On October 31, 1942, Charles Cholmondeley walked into a meeting of the 20 Committee and proposed a solution. The 20 Committee was the British body that coordinated wartime deception. Cholmondeley was 25 years old, a Royal Air Force officer seconded to MI5, and by all accounts an unusual person to have in a room, precise, imaginative, and difficult to surprise. He called it the Trojan Horse Plan. The concept: take a dead body, dress it as a British officer, chain a briefcase of forged documents to its wrist, and let it wash ashore somewhere the Germans would find it. The committee told him to develop it further. He would do that alongside a naval intelligence officer named Ewan Montagu, a barrister by training. As it happened, Montagu was very good at building a lie. But the first thing they needed was something no intelligence operation had ever required: a body. They needed a body, not abstractly, specifically. Someone who had died in circumstances that could look like a plane crash at sea. No visible injuries inconsistent with drowning. No close family likely to raise questions. And available quickly, because the operational window was closing. The man they found was Glyndŵr Michael. He was a Welsh laborer, 34 years old, found near King's Cross Station in London in January 1943. He had accidentally ingested rat poison, a phosphorus compound, and died 2 days later. No fixed address, no family recorded nearby. The St. Pancras coroner, Bentley Purchase, informed Montagu that a candidate had arrived. Glyndŵr Michael's body would cross the Atlantic dressed as a Royal Marine major, carrying forged documents that would eventually reach Adolf Hitler's desk. He did not know this. He could not have. What Cholmondeley needed now was not just a body. He needed to build a person. Major William Martin, Royal Marines, did not exist. He had to be constructed, not just dressed, but inhabited. Cholmondeley and Montagu worked backward from the reader they were trying to fool. What would a German intelligence analyst expect to find on a British officer who had died in a crash at sea? Not just rank and orders, a life. So they built one. Letters from a fictional fiancée named Pam, emotional, specific, written by hand. A letter from an anxious father. A receipt from a London jeweler for an engagement ring, £53, 6 shillings. Theater ticket stubs from an April 22nd performance, counterfoils carefully removed, as a real man would have used them. Overdrawn bank notices, a library of small, credible details, everything built to survive a skeptic. And a photograph. Ewan Montagu had a friend named Jean Leslie. He asked whether he could use her photograph as Pam, Major Martin's fiancée. She agreed. Montagu placed her photograph inside the wallet. Both men had now put something personal inside the person they were building. Whatever happened next, that part of it was real. Inside the briefcase, forged letters from senior British officers pointed toward Sardinia and Greece as the actual Allied invasion targets, not Sicily. The letters were written in the register of documents never meant to be seen. Senior, confident, and indiscreet in exactly the right ways. They were, by any operational measure, as good as such things get. The briefcase was packed. Now someone had to take it to sea. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon on April 19, 1943, HMS Seraph slipped her moorings at Holy Loch, Scotland, and headed south. In the forward torpedo storage space, packed in a sealed steel canister, was Major William Martin. 11 days later, the Seraph surfaced off the Spanish coast. 1 o'clock in the morning on April 30th. Dark water, approximately 1 mile from the town of Huelva. The Atlantic was cold. There was a light wind. The crew brought the canister up from below. They eased the body into the water in a life preserver. Everything Cholmondeley had assembled, the ticket stubs, the wallet, the photograph, the briefcase, the forged letters, went with it. Lieutenant Commander Norman Jewell watched from the casing. When it was done, he returned below. At 7:15, the wireless message went to London. It read, "Mincemeat completed." There was nothing more to do. The operation was now in the hands of the sea, a Spanish fisherman, and whatever curiosity a German intelligence officer might feel about the contents of a dead man's briefcase. Cholmondeley and Montague had built everything that could be built. They could not retrieve it now. Everything depended on what a Spanish fisherman would find and what he would do with it. A Spanish fisherman named José Antonio Rey Maria found the body near the shore at Punta Umbria on the morning of April 30th. The Spanish authorities recovered it. They noted the documents, and here the historical record requires care, because what happened in those offices, in the room where the pathologist examined the body, has not been fully documented for outside scrutiny. What the historical evidence indicates, Spanish military intelligence handled the body, and a forensic examination was conducted. The pathologist's assessment, as reconstructed from subsequent British intelligence reporting and later historical analysis, appears to have supported the cover story. The injury profile was consistent with a man who had died in a crash at sea. Whether the pathologist was deceived or understood more than he recorded, the sources do not resolve. The documents did not stay in Spanish hands for long. German contacts photographed them. They passed from Spanish military intelligence through Madrid. From Madrid, in early May 1943, German couriers forwarded copies north. On approximately May 14th, Adolf Hitler reviewed the material at his field headquarters. He read the forged documents alongside his intelligence service's assessment. He pronounced them genuine. What those documents now set in motion would become the most contested question in the history of the deception. The assessment carried through the German command structure. General Alfred Jodl, the Wehrmacht's chief of operations planning, made a telephone call to the German military attaché in Rome. His words were later recorded by a British intelligence officer who obtained the account after the war. Jodl said, "You can forget about Sicily. We know it's Greece." Mussolini sent a message to the German ambassador in Rome. At the highest levels of both commands, Hitler and Mussolini had read the forged documents from a dead British courier. Both believed them. What followed was not a dramatic transfer of German armies from one end of the Mediterranean to the other. Historians have been careful about this distinction. The German buildup in the Balkans had its own drivers, some of which predated mincemeat. A CIA-sponsored analysis after the war concluded that German anxiety in the Balkans was driven primarily by fear of Italian collapse, not by the forged documents alone. What mincemeat appears to have done is more precise. It fed genuine doubt into the decision about Sicily, at exactly the moment when reinforcement choices were being made. That doubt did not produce German certainty about a wrong target, but it produced German uncertainty about the right one. And in the weeks before an invasion, a defender's uncertainty is itself a form of victory. One British intelligence officer who worked the Sicily planning wrote afterward that the slowness of German reinforcement was influenced by real doubts about Allied intentions, and that the seeds of those doubts were sown by a splendid exercise in deception. The harvest came on the beaches of Sicily. On July 10, 1943, the Allied landing in Sicily began. The two German divisions on the island, the Hermann Göring and the 15th Panzer Grenadier, were experienced and capable. The fighting was serious. Nobody came ashore unopposed. But Germany had not reinforced Sicily to the level it might have. That difference was real. It was one factor among several. The evidence does not support a stronger claim. Operation Mincemeat did not win the Sicily campaign. The men on those beaches did that. What Mincemeat did was change the arithmetic of the fight before it began. Charles Cholmondeley was not on those beaches. He was in London, doing his job, knowing what he had helped to make possible. If the kind of source-led history that gets this specific about what actually happened is what you're here for, subscribe. That's what this channel is built for. What Cholmondeley couldn't yet know was how the story of the operation would be told, and whose name would be at the center of it. The war ended. The intelligence operations that had helped win it were classified, then slowly declassified. And in time, the men who had designed them began to write. In 1953, Ewan Montague published a book called The Man Who Never Was. It sold more than 3 million copies. A film followed. It made Montague famous, not just in intelligence circles, but to anyone who had been curious about what the British had actually done. Almost overnight, the popular understanding of Operation Mincemeat had a name and a face. In the book, Charles Cholmondeley appeared briefly, under a pseudonym, George. Montague offered Cholmondeley a quarter share of the book and film profits. Cholmondeley declined. He was still working in intelligence. He was still bound by official secrecy requirements. He chose not to participate in the public account of an operation he had conceived. The film was produced in 1956. Cholmondeley worked on it as a technical advisor, under the name George. Even the film's director never knew who George was. The quiet man giving technical notes was Charles Cholmondeley, one of the 2 people who had designed the entire operation. This is not a conspiracy. Montague had every right to tell his own story. He told it well. The book is accurate in many details. But history is shaped by who writes first and who writes alone. Montague wrote first, and the man who had walked into the 20 Committee in October 1942 with the original plan, who built Martin's identity, who packed that briefcase, was recorded in the public account as George. A footnote, a name that wasn't even his. That might have been the end of it, if an academic had not, decades later, started reading the files. The fuller picture came later. In 2010, the historian Denis Smyth published a scholarly account of Operation Mincemeat drawn from archival sources that Montague's memoir had not used. It was Smyth who established, in documented detail, what the popular account had left out. The Trojan horse plan was Cholmondeley's own, presented by Cholmondeley, developed by Cholmondeley alongside Montague, and executed as a genuine co-equal partnership between MI5 and naval intelligence. Not Montague's operation with Cholmondeley as a supporting player. Both men's operation. And it was archival research that finally resolved another question the popular account had never addressed plainly. Whose body had been used? Montague, in his private correspondence, had given a solemn promise never to reveal the identity. As late as 1977, he was telling questioners that all of Glyndŵr Michael's relatives had died. That was not accurate. The identity had been concealed because someone had falsified a legal certificate to obtain the body. Admitting who it was would have meant admitting that. Glyndŵr Michael, born January 4, 1909, in Aberbargod, Wales, now has a memorial plaque in Huelva, where his body drifted ashore in the spring of 1943. His name is on it. So is the name Major William Martin, because in the end, they could not be separated. If that gap between who makes history and who gets remembered for it is something you've thought about, the comments are worth using for it. What part of this surprised you most? Charles Cholmondeley retired from intelligence work. He did not publish. He did not claim credit. He died in 1982, having conceived one of the great intelligence deceptions of the Second World War, and watched it become, in the public record, someone else's story. You now know his name.